Welcome to the State of the Nation weekly update brought to you by Pace Car Rental. This is our last look back at the elections and the establishment of a new government. So it's be the last one that I'll be doing alone. But from next week, some of our guests will be returning to assist me with the weekly update, and you'll get to hear from some of the specialists on specific topics. This week, I want to end off the election part of it, because by next week this time we will know the cabinet is. We'll start becoming a government, and we can then go get into normal business within the country. For those that have watched our previous updates, we've ridden the tiger a couple of weeks ago. I was quite depressed, thinking that the government of national unity that has emerged could never emerge. Then it did emerge, and since then we've had another week to digest, and the news is very positive at this stage. Got to understand that it hasn't really taken effect yet because they haven't formed a government. But the response, if one looks at the stock market, if one looks at the reaction, the international reaction, has been very, very positive, and it gives South Africa probably our best chance that we've had in years of turning the corner. So what I want to do in this weekly update is I want to have a look at where each party stands at the moment, the political parties. They were so important to us a few weeks ago as we were heading into the election. But let's have a look at what this government of national unity and the subsequent government of national unity and the effect on the political parties themselves. Because remember, we are always politicking. In 2 years' time. We'll have local government elections, and soon enough we'll start talking about the next general election. And a lot of it can hinge on what happens with this government of national unity. So let's just look at the major parties and what the effect has been of becoming part of the government of national unity or not, and how this could play out in the future in terms of their support. Firstly, I'm going to look at the parties that are in the government of national unity, and then we'll turn to the opposition parties in a minute. So let's first deal with the biggest of the parties, that is the ANC, the African National Congress. As we know, must have been a terrible day in Luthuli House when they realized that they had lost their majority, and not only lost their majority, but lost it quite resoundingly, to go from 57% of the national vote to 40% of the vote. Clearly, that is going to have a colossal impact on the party. It already has, but they haven't felt it yet. Their ministers from the previous administration are still in place. All their public servants and the deployed cadres are still getting their salaries. It's going to change in a few weeks' time. But let's have a look at what they stand to gain or lose by this government of national unity. And quite clearly, the ANC has the most to gain and the most to lose with this government of national unity. So let's look at it from a simplistic point of view. If this government of national unity works out positively for South Africa, I think that the ANC will have what they love to say is the good story to tell. They will say through their diplomacy, through their maturity, through their leadership, the country is doing much better. We're sorry for what we did wrong. Please come back. Please support us. And I think that it could very well work. So for them, they stand to gain a lot. They could even be in a situation, if this government of national unity works really well, to regain a majority at the next general election. I know we're talking a long way out, but a good outcome to this administration will largely benefit the ANC. We do understand that the ANC were punished in two ways heading into this election. One was by people that have decided to vote for other parties, most definitely down in the KZN area, and most importantly by voters, traditional ANC voters, not voting at all. If the ANC do well, it would be fairly, there's an old thing in South African elections. The ANC have traditionally clocked up 10 million votes. That has been their standard over the last of the preceding elections. This election, they got 6 million votes. So one would imagine that they've got at least sort of 3 million votes out there that probably didn't go to the polls, that they could claim back if this government of national unity works out. If it doesn't work out, the ANC will carry the can. They have led everybody into this government of national unity. The people that have been left out will say it's the ANC's fault for dealing with the wrong people. The people who they have in the government of national unity will blame it on the ANC. I feel that if this government of national unity does not work out, the ANC their slide will be inexorable. They will become a 30% party, even if they break with their current coalition partners and go into a government of national unity with MK and EFF. It's not going to save them, because those parties will just steal the thunder. So very, very important for the ANC that this works out. The DA, the Democratic Alliance, I think that if one looks at it from the other aspect, they have gone into this, and there's quite a few commentators that are saying the DA has got a lot to lose if this doesn't work out. I'm not so sure. I don't think the DA has a lot to lose. If this GNU doesn't work out, the DA will obviously blame it on the ANC, and the DA supporters will at least stick with the DA because at least they tried. I don't see them losing a great deal of support if this arrangement does not work out. So what happens if it does work out? Well, once again, it depends. I think that at one level, the DA will get back many of those votes that left them, that have gone to DA light parties, let's call them that. Parties like Action SA, Rise Mzansi, Build One South Africa, maybe even the Freedom Front Plus. They'll pick up those sort of 4 or 5% of the vote, unless the DA starts becoming more appealing to the majority of South Africa and makes a significant break into the bulge of the voters, especially in the black middle class. So for the DA, there is some upside. There could be a lot of upside if people begin to take the DA into their confidence, if they are good coalition partners, and certainly handle the issue of nationhood a little better than what they have been. If they're able to influence the discussion, they will do well. They will do especially well at the next local government election, because South Africa's dirty little secret is that when people move from townships to the suburbs, they are quite happy to vote for the DA. They're very happy for the DA to run their wards, but not too happy to have a DA leader as president. So I think in the short term, if this arrangement works out, the government of national unity, the DA could get a very big payoff at the next local government election. Staying with the major partners of the government of national unity, the IFP. The IFP actually stands to gain quite a lot. I think that the IFP's biggest issue heading into this election was showing that there was a party after the ownership of the party of Mangosuthu Buthelezi, who passed away a few years back, to the point that the IFP still had Buthelezi's face on some of the campaign, which I felt was ridiculous but understandable, because it became synonymous. The one became synonymous with the other. With Velenkosini Tlabisa's leadership, under his leadership, the IFP has started to create its own image, a new image of a party that's a little bit more modernist, but yet retaining that Zulu feel to it. They have gone into the government of national unity, which in a way is a head-on statement to the people that voted for Mkhonto weSizwe in the Zulu-speaking areas. It's them or us. And I've got a feeling those voters could be swayed. So once again, if this arrangement works out, the IFP could pick up quite a number of votes off Mkhonto weSizwe, especially if Mkhonto weSizwe remains difficult to deal with. We have already seen a turn of events at recent by-elections in some of the KZN areas, where the IFP was able to build on what they had in previous elections, whereas the MK got less in local government elections. There were quite a few elections done, especially in the southern KZN area, where Mkhonto weSizwe didn't get the amount of support they got in the provincial election. So in the provincial election, we all understand that IFP got about 45% of the KZN vote. But then in the by-election, they only managed to get about 25%. And this could be the Achilles heel of Mkhonto weSizwe. And we'll deal with that in a second. But the biggest beneficiary could be, if this works out, IFP could seriously challenge Mkhonto weSizwe in those Zulu-speaking areas. What happens if it doesn't work out? Well, if it doesn't work out, I got a feeling that this could be a road to ruin for the IFP. So they've got a lot riding on this. Patriotic Alliance, Gayton McKenzie, has definitely made a statement, definitely got traction as the party of coloured interests. He stands an excellent chance of maintaining that vote, keeping his role, if this government of national unity works well. The biggest danger to Gayton McKenzie is that he himself starts becoming a little flip-flopper, hard to deal with, and as we saw in many of his coalition arrangements, eventually the Patriotic Alliance can't help themselves and they start asking for too much. Their partners get angry, soon enough there's fights, he's got a ready opponent in the DA, and the Patriotic Alliance could be seen as very disruptive. If the government of national unity is working and the Patriotic Alliance becomes very demanding and greedy, they could get kicked out of the government of national unity. It's not really going to affect their overall majority. It could be a very, very bad image for the Patriotic Alliance. If they play by the rules, become a good partner in that coalition that's going to run the country, they could definitely do well out of this, maintain their votes, and maybe even build on the strong showing of this past general election. But I think that the PA's biggest issue is, can they control themselves from being perennial troublemakers? Can they be out of the headlines and let the others take much of the credit while they just become good at what they do? The jury's out on that one. Good party is in there. I think that's just more of a reward for Patricia de Lille throwing her lot in with the ANC in the past. I don't think this matters one way or another. I think that they are one election away from extinction. Now let's look at the parties that are not part of the government of national unity. And there we've got the third biggest party at the last election, and that's Mkhonto weSizwe. Their name has come up already because they were the factor that changed everything in this last election. They were the party that turned everything on its head by taking a lot of support away from some of the parties. They took support away, and I've worked out a formula which I think would stand up to many of the predictions made, and that is that Mkhonto weSizwe got about 14.5% of the vote. And if you divide their share of the market, I think realistically you could say that half their vote was taken off the ANC, and about a quarter of their vote was taken off the IFP, and a quarter of their vote was taken off the EFF. Mkhonto weSizwe is not behaving like a political party. Sometimes you can't help getting the impression that the people most surprised by their performance has been Mkhonto weSizwe themselves. They seem to be a little bit undercooked. They don't really have policies that are workable. They want to go to court all the time and fight old battles. This taking on of the election results, I think, is a bad idea, because I think most South Africans are quite comfortable with the outcome of the elections, and not everybody is shouting fraud. We've got about 3 or 4 people shouting fraud, and that doesn't make a quorum. It seems like it's going to be like they're going to be difficult people to deal with in a country that's in a bad state. If the country's in a bad state, you know, you're a citizen of South Africa. What we need now is a little bit of stability, a lot of economic growth, and just everybody to calm down, right? And they are doing the exact opposite. What are the prospects for Mkhonto we Sizwe? Well, the real test is going to happen at local government level between now and the next election. They're off to, in my opinion, a very bad start by boycotting Parliament before they even got there. I think that tells you that they're not serious about politics. They seem to be more built on revenge. But if they perform poorly in local government elections, be it by-elections or the coming local government elections in 2 years' time, it does not augur well. What is going to happen is going to be the inexorable slide, the many breakaways, the people leaving the party. It's already starting to look like it's going to happen, and I can't see how it doesn't happen. I would be extremely surprised if Mkhonto we Sizwe is a factor in the next election, regardless of what happens. Their only chance is that this government of national unity is such a disaster, an unbelievable disaster, that people will start looking towards populists to say, rescue us. You need the country to go to war for them to do well. If we all get back to work and people start enjoying some benefit from a government of national unity, I think it's going to be very, very difficult for Mkhonto we Sizwe to benefit from a government that works, even if it works half well. They can only deal in chaos, and that is, I doubt if it's going to happen. So, yeah, we could have a situation much like we had with COPE, where after 2009, the fact that they'd been put together in such a hurry meant that they didn't have decent, coherent policies, even though they had good footprint in Parliament. They could never speak with one voice, and soon enough people started to leave and go join other parties, etc., etc. Their support base started to reject them, and now they're out of Parliament. So I don't see this as being any different, because I don't see them galvanizing behind a good idea. Then we get on to my good old mates, the economic freedom fighters. I think they've got a game on their hands. They've got one of two strategies. They are outside of the government of national unity, and that's largely of their own making. Now let's understand that both MK and EFF are not in the government of national unity because they insisted on certain terms. They were very difficult to work with. They wanted key positions in government, the finance ministry. EFF said they'd only be in if Floyd Shivambu was made Minister of Finance. Both parties said they'll only become a government of national unity if the ANC got rid of Cyril Ramaphosa. That's just almost saying we are not open for business, and they have been left out. So where does this leave the EFF? Well, it leaves them with policies that are not proving to be overwhelmingly popular. They were born out of revolution and frustration, and as I've said many times, I've never seen South Africa as an overly revolutionary country, you know, and whether their message actually lands, I think, is a basic question. But the EFF got there through theatrics. They got there through organization, got there on the back of the very loud voice of Julius Malema. Will this still be enough? Let's look at the two scenarios. If this government of national unity works, it's going to be very difficult to see the EFF growing at all. They might, in fact, become less and less attractive, especially to younger middle-class people who are the bulk of their voters. You know, the students at university. It might become unfashionable to wear a uniform when you go to university. You know, these things come and go in cycles. So if the government of national unity works, the EFF really lose badly. If the government of national unity doesn't work, the EFF are going to be all over this one. And you could, in actual fact, see them as being the biggest beneficiaries of a failure of the government of national unity. They will make an absolute meal out of it. The I told you so's would be very loud, and they would have the CVs of just about every senior ANC person on Julius Malema's desk within weeks. So the downside to the situation as we have it is that both the Mkhonto weSizwe and the economic freedom fighters are incentivized to make this not work, which means they're going to try every trick possible. Court cases are going to flow because we know Jacob Zuma, he seems to love court cases. And the theatrics are going to flow because we know Julius Malema deals in theatrics. There's going to be an attempt to stoke violence. If the police and security services are kept on board, that won't happen. But they need chaos, and they need it soon. They don't need the government of national unity to be settled in, and they don't need the people of South Africa to start enjoying the prosperity. So hold on to your hats. They are really going to have to try, they're really going to try hard to destabilize us. Some of the other marginal players over there, Freedom Front Plus, Action SA are in a similar boat. If the government of national unity works, the DA will pick up their votes. If it doesn't work, there'll be big I told you so's and an attempt to say that the problem was that you should never have done anything with the ANC in the first place. Aside from that, one of the major changes that could happen is that if this arrangement works in South Africa and South Africa starts growing, we might actually see a decline in the number of political parties, because at the moment, the growth of political parties is usually a sign of people not being happy with the options that are available to them and saying, you know who can solve this problem? I can. I'm starting my own party. If the country's doing well, we'll have fewer new parties and some of the old ones would disappear. So let's see. It's going to be interesting. I'm going to remain optimistic. I think this government of national unity has got the right people in the room for South Africa now. And I think the people that are involved are incentivized enough to make this work, and they've got the numbers. So let's raise the pace car rental mug. Please go rent a car there. And we'll bring you a lot more interesting content on the State of the Nation. Thank you for joining me.